welcome to this seminar. It's entitled Better and Faster Decisions, and what we're really looking at is how we can harness the power of Kanbanize and augment it by connecting it with Power BI, which is a tremendous visualization tool. So in tonight's webinar, we're going to look at how those two can work in harmony to help enhance the speed and quality of decision making in an organization. And what we're going to work through tonight are 5 basic steps, really. The first step is how we can connect Kanbanize and Power BI together. And then inside Power BI, we're going to look at how we can shape the data to make it useful or create a data model. And then we're going to create some Power BI visualizations and a report that helps us to visualize the data to support better decision making. Then we're going to look at how we can publish Power BI reports and dashboards. And then finally, we're going to look at how we can embed those Power BI reports back into Kanbanize dashboards so that we've closed the circle, absolute closed loop. So my intent is that by the end of the seminar, you'll be able to do this yourself, either tonight or tomorrow, but I'm guessing most people won't be doing that tonight after this. So the idea for this seminar really came from preparation that we were doing for Lean Agile London, which ran in London this week on Monday and Tuesday. And Tom, who's on the line, and myself, and I should introduce myself. My name's Keith Howells, by the way. I'm the managing partner of Project4 Learning Lab, and we're a platinum partner to Kanbanize. And so at Lean Agile London this week, Tom and myself were representing Kanbanize and supporting the exhibition space. And we thought, what is it that we can demonstrate beyond the functionality of Kanbanize that would excite people? And we thought we would create this seminar. We thought we would look at how we can exploit the data in Kanbanize and visualize it in Power BI. And so the idea was born. And it was a fabulous event, really enjoyed it. Loads of people came up and had a conversation with us about the functionality of Kanbanize, what they use today, how the inbuilt analytics that exist. And we spent quite a lot of time running through stuff. And we planned an engagement activity with them. So we played a little game with people who came to the stand, and we called it the Play It Forward Challenge. So we created a board and some custom cards in Kanbanize, and we asked people to play the game. And if they got to the end of the workflow, then Kanbanize would generously donate some money to the sponsored charity for the conference. And so this was the workflow and the card that we designed. So we asked people, what was their name? What industry did they work in? How are they feeling? What was their mood from a variety of drop-down options? Their email address, and then which functionality were they particularly interested in Kanbanize? Was it connecting strategy to execution? Was it agile at scale? Was it about unlocking or enabling process flow? Or was it more agile portfolio program or project management? And then there was a little find out more column, and then there was a column called feel good. Oh no, there was one final column called share your wisdom. So we asked people for their top lean agile tip so that we could share a bit of wisdom. And if they worked to the end, then they would get a donation. And what we thought we would do is we would connect up Power BI and create a Power BI report that visualized the summary of what people put in and what they said. And this is that report. So here's the summary. You can see in the top left, we asked people how they were feeling. And the great news is that the lowest people were feeling on the mood lift was curious or interested. And some people were even grateful. They'd transcended wisdom and they'd moved to gratitude. Then you can see we had a breakdown of the industries that they work in. 8 people declined to answer, but there was a spread of different people in different industries. And then you could see the people who did answer were most interested in agile at scale. and then connecting strategy to execution, portfolio management, and not so many in terms of enabling process flow, although loads of people were really interested in the flow analytics that are in Kanbanize. And I should pause at this point to say that the inbuilt analytics in Kanbanize are awesome, and they're all set up to be analytics around establishing flow fundamentally. And so we would advocate not using Power BI to visualize those, but use the functionality in the box. Where Power BI comes into its own is to fuse that data with other data sources in an organization, or to make it more customized to the view that you want to provide. So you can see on the bottom a bunch of tips around what they wanted to share, with others turned into a word cloud. And at that point in time, we had a little dial that showed the amount of donation based on the number of engagements that we had at that point in time against the target condition. So you can see that we can produce some relatively beautiful visuals relatively quickly that are being driven from the data that's being put into Kanbanize. But what is the problem with this kind of report? Anyone want to put in the chat what the problem is with this kind of report? What's it not doing for us? Tom, you're going to have to look at the chat. No one's put anything in the chat. What's the problem with this report? It's beautiful. Well, I think it is. but what's wrong with it? Tom, I'm going to pick on you. What's the problem with this report? Synchronization from Jose. It's a slide, not a report from Jim. It's static in the PowerPoint because there's no new data, but the data automatically updates, which I'll show you in a bit. But Jim's hit the nail on the head. It's a slide. It's not a report. And it's not a report in that it doesn't help us to make decisions. So we've translated data into information and made it look pretty, but what can I actually do with this? I can't do much with it. It's wallpaper. So what we want to do is transcend beyond that and recognize that data really is only powerful if it helps us to make either faster or better decisions. And this happens quite a lot in business. Lots of data is available, lots of reports get created. Most of them don't tell us anything. And if they do tell us something, it's not obvious what the next action is. And so when we're using Kanbanize or Power BI or other tools, our ability to translate data into information is a helpful step, but it's only helpful if we can then translate information into decisions. And decisions are only helpful if we decide to take action. And thank you, Dieter. Decisions are only helpful if they help us to take action, and the action that we take should be based on some hypothesis that taking that action will help move us towards some sort of enhanced future state. So after an action, we should be able to see a result, and based on that result, we're probably going to learn something. Something's going to have happened that we didn't expect it, that would furnish us with new knowledge. And if we continue to go around these cycles at a fast cadence, we can learn much faster and we can become wiser. So the speed at which we translate data into information, into decisions, into actions, into results, into knowledge and learning is the thing that drives business performance. And this can be a challenge when we just can easily connect data into reporting tools like Power BI. So I'm going to step through an example, and it's an example of a company that we worked with, and I've anonymized the data, but I just want to illustrate the point. So this company was a relatively small company, but very successful startup and growing fast. So growing their revenues, and they were sat in year 3 of their development, and they were using Kanbanize in an unusual way. So they were using Kanbanize to plan and forecast their revenue. And they had a target for the year to take £1.5 million of revenue. And they were sat in May, like we are now, and they had £630,000 revenue forecast for the year. And that was the first time that they were in this position, because they'd experienced quite significant growth. So now there's a gap between the target condition and their current state, and they're 5 months through the year. And so they thought, okay, well, we'll look at our sales pipeline. We'll look at what's coming through our sales pipeline. And they had a 6-stage sales pipeline, again, that they were using in Kanbanize. And those 6 steps went from input into the pipeline, potential opportunities, into leads, into validated leads or prospects that then turned into visits, scanning the environment and the context of the customer, making a proposal, negotiating, and hopefully winning. And they found that as opportunities went through the pipeline, then the probability of winning increased. So items at the start of the pipeline, relatively low probabilities, items at the end, relatively high probabilities. And they were looking at what is it that they could do that could fill that gap in their revenue in the remainder of the year. And they concluded they could do one of 3 things, or all of 3 things. They could either increase the size or the number of potential opportunities going in, so they could focus their activity on marketing, target particular areas. They could look to increase the conversion rate, given a lead or an opportunity going into the funnel. They could look at what it is that could make them more successful in their conversion, turning it into a win. Or they could look at reducing the cycle time from opportunity to win, and sometimes lose, by focusing their work and accelerating stuff through. And the question becomes, how do you decide? And many businesses would say, well, this year we're going to focus on increasing our marketing activity and targeting this sector. But that doesn't work when organizations are seeking to be more agile and more responsive. The feedback loop isn't fast enough. So they were asking, where is it that we should focus? What actions can we take? And how will we know if they've been effective? And I've got cartoons of their Power BI dashboards and reports that help them answer that question. And if my Wi-Fi and the technology works, then I'm going to share them with you now. So I'm just going to switch onto my iPad and we'll see what happens. Nothing at the moment. Okay. So hopefully you can see that this is a dashboard, and this is a dashboard of anonymized data that this company found themselves looking at. So on the left-hand side, they had the condition of their sales funnel, and on the right-hand side, they had their revenue forecasting. So as I said, they had a target revenue of 1.5 million and a gap to the target condition where they had a forecasting revenue of £630,000, of which £612,000 was guaranteed. And then on the chart on the right, you can see how that, now I've plotted it for this year, but you can see how that plays out in the year. So you can see a slow start in the year, May, June, July, August, building, and then very little in September and into Q4 of the year. So a big revenue gap. And you can see from the chart the breakdown of clients that they had, and they were expecting to forecast in their revenue. On the left-hand side, you can see the state of the sales funnel. So, the expected value, which is the chart on the top left, they had a target condition of 750,000 and a current expected value of 244,000. And the target for the expected value is the probability of winning the opportunity multiplied by the value of the opportunity. So it's probability times reward, if you like. And it's the sum of all of the opportunities that they have in their sales funnel. And they'd set the target condition as half of the revenue target for the year, because their thinking was they should be able to transition from opportunity to win or lose in their sales funnel in 6 months. And if they can do that, if they can roll all of the opportunities in their sales funnel every 6 months, then it's their expected value target is going to be half their revenue target, was their thinking. Felipe, I will answer that question shortly with a bit of luck. So they had 13 opportunities in the funnel, and you can see those number of opportunities broken down by stage. And underneath that, you can see the funnel in terms of the value of those opportunities that sit there. So you can see that from there straight away, there's a gap in the revenue position in Q4, a big gap, a big drop off. They have opportunities in the sales funnel, but they're not at the end of the funnel. They're in the middle or at the start. They don't have that many opportunities. They don't have enough to fulfill their target condition, but they do have lots of opportunities in the targeted marketing, which are people or industries or areas that they might want to target to try and win some new business to help support their revenue growth. So I'm going to pause at that point, but hopefully even at this point, you can see that just simple graphs related to simple hypotheses can provide lots of information, which might help identify what decisions and what actions might be useful to move more towards a desired future state. I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions at this point, either in the chat or with hands up. Okay, so one from Robert. I would have imagined a plot of revenue per period versus mean cycle time for that period as a means of measuring if reduced sales funnel cycle time has any influence on revenue. So that's a really good point. There was this hypothesis that they could roll their sales funnel every 6 months. And so you'd probably want to know whether their cycle time, what their cycle time through the funnel is and how that relates back to revenue generation, recognizing that they'll probably lag a little bit. So we will dive into that in a second. Felipe has the question of how is the data configured in Kanbanize. We will step into Kanbanize shortly. Are there any other questions at this stage? Okay, so it's probably important to say that this is a dashboard view in Power BI, and this data is dynamic, and there are some reports that sit underneath it. So if I just switch to another report, so this is the underpinning revenue data that sits under that report. So you can start to see a bit more of a breakdown of value by client, number of days, their day rate or their consulting. Jim says, any insights on the causes for the gap from forecast to actual? Well, that would be an interesting one as well, wouldn't it? Our targets in the business, are they based on plans or are they based on desired growth or desired future state? In this business, they were based on desired future state rather than forecasting based on what was in the funnel, on the basis that it was likely they were going to win work that wasn't identified at the time at which the target was set. But what a great question to ask. So this was the data they were looking at. How much revenue are they getting? Where's it coming from? Are they spread? How does it break down by client? So if we click on, I don't know, client, then it tells you what the spread of that data is, what the day rates are, how many days are in there. So we can start to get interesting data by filtering and providing the right visuals. So this is what the graph or the chart looked like that they were using to support their decision making. And here's an example of the data that sat in the sales funnel. Now, the question was asked about cycle time, and you can see average cycle time at the bottom in days is 0. And that's because I've constructed a dummy board that mirrors what they had, but that just means that the cycle time of all the cards isn't accurate. So in their real one, they would have had cycle time, which would have been accurate in days, which would have allowed them to look at that. So now we have a report that looks at the expected value, the position and value of the opportunities in the sales funnel, as we saw, a breakdown of those that are closest to the end in the process. So they're either at negotiate, proposal, or scan phase, and how that breaks down by different clients. And you can see on the left-hand side, as well as the number of opportunities in the funnel, the expected value, which I said is the probability times the value, or expected value, and then the total funnel value, which is the raw value of each opportunity. And then on average, their average opportunity value, or their mean, was 64,000, and their win rate was 50%. So something entering the funnel, there was a 50% chance that they'd win. And again, they were looking at the data and looking at how this breaks down by company, where are the biggest opportunities, and you can see from the chart the estimated value by client. The top 3 clients will clearly not close the gap. So for them to drive their revenue, the answer was not, I need to do just more targeted marketing, or I need to ensure that we win these opportunities by focusing on these. The answer was they need to do both. They needed to win those big opportunities from those companies, and they needed to go into their targeted marketing to look at what the biggest opportunities there might be and how they could accelerate those through the sales funnel. So just a sort of real but stylized and therefore hypothetical example of how we can start to take data that sits in Kanbanize, turn it into information to support decisions, and then how we can verify our hypothesis for the action we're going to take through looking at the effect on the results. And we can moderate our approach. So I'm just going to try and answer Felipe's question on how the data is segmented in Kanbanize. And I must say that I have incredible Wi-Fi problems. So I'm not confident in what's going to come after this. So here's how the data was segmented in the sales funnel. So you can see, if I collapse all of these down, that each stage is a column. They've also got swim lanes, and they've got that because they just wanted to differentiate between existing work with clients that's going to lead to more work, work with existing clients that's going to develop into other areas, or work with people they've never worked with before. And because they were quite smart and they didn't want to lose the data, for opportunities that went cold, they've moved those into a dormant swim lane, which means they can take it out of the data, but they don't lose the data in case that becomes live and warm again. And so you can see there are just a bunch of cards in each of the columns, and they've got an estimated value, they've got a conversion probability, they've got an account name, and they've got a whole host of other stuff. So probably the key thing is the way they've configured the columns and the custom fields that they've put in to create the data artifacts that they want to represent in the Power BI reports to support their decision making. So I'm just going to pause there. A question for Kanbanize from Jim: is there a Kanbanize collapse all, expand all columns button or keystroke? I've no idea. Absolutely. Carolina?
No, I don't think.
No, only at big level, I think. So, yeah. So what I'm going to step through now is the 5 steps that we talked about, how we connect the data that's in Kanbanize with Power BI. I'm going to try and do this live. I'm not hugely confident it's going to work. If it doesn't, Tom is on hand with some pre-recorded videos that I'll narrate. So we'll see what happens. So the first thing that we need to do, if this is the data source, then we need to create a query that creates the connection with Power BI. And so we do that through the advanced search box. And so I've got this board, the sales funnel example. So I'm going to run the search and I've got a bunch of data. And so it may or may not be pre-configured to have all of the fields that I want. So I'm just going to check that I have those things. So we're just going to select whichever fields we want. I'm not going to recreate the whole chart tonight, so I wouldn't do that to you. And we might want some of the custom fields from this example. So we definitely want the conversion probability. We definitely want the estimated value. We might want the number of days. So let's go with that, I think, for now. So when we apply those changes, obviously, all of the fields that I've selected end up in the data table. So Caroline has got the close all columns and swim lanes in the current board is Alt, Shift, and C. Thank you. Everyone learns tonight, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So once we've...
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So once we've got the column that we want and the data that we want to save that search. So I'll give it a name. And you can see under here, there's a little tick box that says Power BI query. And when we click that and save, it creates the script that we can use inside Power BI to create the connection. So if I click it on and then I save the filter, then you can see that code is generated that we can use in Power BI, and it gives us a little click to clipboard option so that we can copy it. So now I'm going to step into Power BI, I hope. I am, but you're not, because of how I've shared the screen. How perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to step into Power BI. So this is Power BI, and it's probably worth saying at this point that there are 2 distinct elements to Power BI. One is the online web server, where you can build reports. It's principally about visualizing data and sharing reports, which we'll show in a second. But what you're looking at now is called Power BI Desktop. It's an app that is free to download, and it's where you build your data models and your reports before publishing them. So it's called Power BI Desktop, as you can see at the top of the screen. And so when we open Power BI Desktop and we're confronted with this blank example, then what we need to do now is we need to use the data query that we've generated in Kanbanize, and we need to put it in. And so we do that by clicking on this button here. This is Edit Power Query button. And when we click on that, it creates a query, which is where all the data manipulation and all the coding takes place in Power BI. So we're now in the back of Power BI, and what we do is we click New Source. We want to create a new query, and we want to create a blank query, and we can do that from New Source. And we can see that there are lots of different data sources that we can connect up in Power BI, And if I were to click more, then there'd be a whole host of connectors that are available. But for the Kanbanize connection, we want to click blank query. And when I do that, it will slowly but surely generate a query. And what I want to do now is I'm going to open up the advanced editor setting by clicking on this button here, advanced editor. And that gives me a space where I can paste in the code that I copied from the Kanbanize search query. So if I do that, just paste it in and click done, then I cross all of the fingers I have to hope that the connection works live. Thankfully it does. So what you'll notice now is that it's imported all of the data that was brought up by the search query in Kanbanize into Power BI. So if I scroll along, you can see all of the columns that I selected and all of the data that sits within it. And the eagle-eyed of you might have noticed on the right-hand side, a bunch of applied steps appeared. And those applied steps are basically the transformations that are taking place to the data at each step. And so it's auto-generated code effectively, that when I manipulate the data, it will add another step. And then every time the data gets sucked in from Kanbanize, it steps through those applied steps and transforms it in the way that we want it to be transformed. Kanbanize is really good in terms of how it presents data from the search query into Power BI. So typically there's very little manipulation that's needed, but we might want to do some because it might not quite be in the format that we want. And in this particular example, I'm going to demonstrate how we can change some of the data to make it more useful to us. So I'm going to scroll across to a field that's called something like conversion probability. So you can see this here, this field, conversion probability percentage, and you can see a range of values that exist. And you might be able to see that there's an ABC 1, 2, 3 icon there. And what that's basically saying is, this is a general field, general data type. I don't really know what it is. Is it text? Is it a number? I'm not sure. And we know it's a number, and we want to use that number shortly because we want to multiply the probability of winning the opportunity times the value of that opportunity. So we need to translate it into a number. And the way we do that in Power BI is we click on the field or on the column, and then you can see at the top of the screen in the transform section, it says data type any. And we're going to change that to decimal number, I think. So when I click decimal number, you'll see it's changed to 1.2, which is the visual indicator it's a decimal number. And it now knows that it can use that in a calculation. So if you remember what you saw from the sales funnel BI visualization, is we saw expected value. And expected value, I said, was probability times the estimated value of the lead. And that's not something that comes directly from Kanbanize. That's something that we have to calculate. So we can calculate that in this Power BI query before we choose to do something with the data. And one of the ways in which we can do that is we can add a new column to this data set. So if I click custom column will give me a dialog box that allows me to create a new column based on a combination of other columns. So if I wanted to create something called expected value, which was that thing that we were using in the sales funnel, then I need to pick up conversion probability as one of the available columns. And then I need to multiply it, which is just that star, by the estimated value of the lead in pounds. And if I click OK, you can see it's created a new column called expected value. It's added a custom column. You can see that it's not a number, it's general. So I need to change that format. But the eagle-eyed amongst you will also see that it hasn't dealt with it as a percentage. It's just multiplied 11 by 40,000 to give 440,000. So the number's not correct. So there are two things I could do. I could delete the column and try again, or I could change the settings. Not sure which one I'm going to do. I'm going to change the settings, I think. So I'm just going to put in a divide by 100 in there to recognize that it's a percentage. So you can see now that's changed the numbers, and now I just need to change the format of that from data type any to decimal number. And now Power BI knows that that's a number. So at this point, I think I've manipulated all of the data that I want to manipulate to make it useful to create some visuals. So what I do now is I close and apply this. This is the back end. This is the heavy data and query and coding side. I close it and apply. And what that then does, hopefully, is it applies those changes and then brings the data fields forward into the report builder in Power BI. So when this eventually runs, testing the RAM, the Wi-Fi and everything in my computer, when this eventually runs, you'll see on the right-hand side that all of the fields that we created in the query appear on the right-hand side of the screen. So here we go. It's working on it. So, right, so you can see on the right-hand side now, all of the fields that I created are now available in the report builder. So I can do something with them. And you can see expected value is in there, which was the column I just created. And you can see it's got a sign to show that it's a sum, and that's really the visual indicator that that's a number field. And you can see here the deadline, if I was using it, is a calendar field, and the rest are general or text fields. So now I'm in a state where I've got the data, I've created the connection in the model, and I can start to create visuals of that data to mirror what we've just seen, hopefully. So I just need to remember what we've just seen. So first things first, let me just move my Zoom bar, which is in the wrong place for me. So first things first, we had some really pretty visuals before. And so we're going to go to insert, and we're going to insert some images and pictures to make this thing look slightly better. So I'm going to insert a picture of the Kanbanize logo, and I might make that a little bit smaller. And I'll just move that in the top right corner. So I've got a nice little Kanbanize logo, and we called this example sales funnel, I think. So I've got a range of options in Power BI to configure the look and feel of this report. But in this example, I'm just going to create a text box, and I'm going to select the text. I'm going to make it slightly larger, and I'm going to make the box small. And there's quite a lot of, it's a little bit clunky at times, but there's quite a lot of drag and drop functionality and alignment functionality you can see in Power BI to help you get what it is that you think you want. So now I've got some data that helps explain what the report is, helps maybe make it look nice, and you can put a whole bunch of pictures and text in and around. But I haven't got any visualizations at this point that are using the data that we've just shaped successfully. So I'm going to want and need to do that. Okay. So to replicate what we had, you can now see that as well as the fields on the right-hand side, I've got a range of inbuilt visualizations that are available to me. And you might notice that I've got this gauge visualization, which was one of the visualizations that we used to create the expected value against the target condition. So I'm now going to just click on that, and you'll see that a skeleton of a gauge appears on the screen, and it's blank because there's no data inside it. And you can see here that there are different fields that can be populated, which will generate that visualization. So we were looking to visualize expected value. So I'm simply going to drag and drop that field into the value and hope that it does something. There we go. That seems like a very large value. So let's have a look at what's going on there. Okay. So you can see I've got an expected value in there, and you can see it's significantly larger than I led you to believe earlier. And so there's a question as to, is this good data or is this not? And it may be that I need to filter the data to only show the stuff that I'm really interested in. And if you remember, when I showed you the board, there were multiple columns. Some columns weren't related to the status of the sales funnel. So what I'm going to want to do is filter on the columns that I'm interested in and filter out all of the other ones. So I'm picking up column name as one of the fields, and I've got an option. I can either drag it to this place, which applies the filter to the visual only. I can drag it to a filter on this particular page of the report, so it applies to all visuals, or I can drag it to filters on all pages, so it would apply to all pages of the report if I had multiple pages. So in this example, I'm just going to drop it as filters on this page. And what you can see now is that there's a whole host of other data that's in here from other columns that aren't in the sales funnel process. So I'm just going to remove all of the done, all of the lost, all of the removed, and all of the targeted marketing ones, because I'm not interested in those. And there seem to be two versions of one in there. So having filtered now, you can see that the values have changed, and we're back down to something that's a little bit closer to what we had before. So now I've got 205,000 of expected value in the funnel, which looks much closer to it. And so now what I want to do is I want to add a target line and probably change the maximum value in this. All visuals in Power BI have these three things at the top. So this is the visual that shows, this is the menu option that allows you to add data to the visual, which is what we did there. This allows you to format the visual, and this allows you to add further analytics. So what we're going to do is we're going to format the visual. And we're going to look at the gauge axis, which is the one that we were looking at. So previously we'd set our target condition at 750,000. So I'll put that in, and that line doesn't appear on the visual because the maximum in the visual is currently 410,000. So I'm going to make that 1 million. So now you can see that we have a chart that looks relatively close to the one that I showed you earlier. And I can resize it and drag it and drop it around the screen to place it wherever I want to put it. One thing you may or may not have noticed with the chart that I showed is the color of this number was red-ish, and that sort of comes from conditional formatting. So in data labels under values, I can set a conditional format and define, much like we can in Excel or somewhere else, a set of rules that help define what that color should display as. So hopefully you can see from that we can build these things relatively quickly. Another view that I showed was a funnel view. So if you remember, we had a funnel of number of opportunities by stage. So now I've got the skeleton. I want to add into values. I want a count of the cards. So probably the best way to count the number of cards is to select the task ID of the card, because that's unique. And I want a distinct count. So if I click on the little arrow on the right-hand side of this field, I get a whole range of options as to what data I want to show. So I want a distinct count of the task ID, and you can see currently I've got 1 bar. If I add a data field to the category, then I'll segment out this bar. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do it based on column name. And you can see now, having done that, that it's segmented out the data in each of the columns accordingly. One thing to notice about Power BI is by default, each visual filters the information on other visuals. So if I clicked on the 6 in lead, you see this chart would change to reflect only the value of those 6 in lead. If I click back off it, it shows the whole value. If I click on visit, the same, negotiate, the same. So that's the default. You can turn those on or off based on, I think it's format and edit interactions. And basically you can go in there and you can change how each of the visuals responds to clicking on the other visuals. So you can see that we can build the report relatively quickly. So if I wanted another funnel now in this report based on expected value, or actually value of the opportunity rather than expected value, then I just do the same thing. I pick up the expected value field, I drag it in, I segment it by column name, and now I have the values in there as well as the count. And again, if I click on these things, then it changes the data in all of the other graphs. And you'll be able to see from here a whole load of different visuals. The only other one that exists on here that I haven't showed you yet is something called, don't do that, is something called card. So there's a card visual that just allows you to put numerical data in. So it's asking for a field. We wanted to look at the number of opportunities in the funnel, say. So if I just put the task ID in and went to distinct count, then I'd get 24 opportunities. And I can resize that and move that around and add a title to it. So I'm going to pause at this point, but hopefully you can see that you can build up lots of interactive graphs and visualizations and lay them out however you want to give you the best insight that you want to gain. Are there any questions at this stage? If you put them in the chat, if you have any, that'd be great. If you don't, I will move on, I think. Okay, I'll move on, but feel free to put stuff in the chat if needs be. So now we're in, so now we've got our report. Just one coming in on the chat. Oh, thank you, Jim, appreciate that. So now we've got our report. We want to save it, probably. So I'll save it as something, test report, and it's saved. And now I want to move it from my desktop where no one can see it, and it's a design mode, into something that's published and usable. And the way I do that is I click publish in the top right-hand side. To publish these things on a Power BI server requires two things. It requires a Microsoft 365 license, and it requires a Power BI license, and there are a few tiers of Power BI license, but it requires those two things. And basically, when I click publish, it's going to give me a list of workspaces that are effectively SharePoint sites that I can publish this report to. So I'm going to publish it to the Kanbanize seminars workspace, and it's going to do that in the background. It knows I'm signed in, and you can see it says success. And I'm going to try it. I'm going to try and view it online. I'm not hopeful this is going to work based on my Wi-Fi. So fingers crossed, but if not, we're going to move to Tom's videos. So let's see what happens. What would ordinarily happen, he said, hoping it will, is that that wouldn't happen. I've got a Wi-Fi configuration issue. So what I'm going to suggest is that we switch to Tom, and Tom, I think it's video 5. Can you start with video 5, please? Give me some sort of sign, Tom. Thank you. So here's an example that I recorded earlier on the basis that the Wi-Fi may be a bit dodgy. So this is just stepping through what we've just seen. I'm just going to save it as something. I'm about to publish it. And then I think this video also deals with what it looks like online. So hopefully you'll see my cursor move to publish. I'll do the same thing. I'll select Kanbanize seminars as a workspace. And you'll have the joy of seeing that churning through again. Having done that, we go in online and we see how that looks online. And now it defaults to view mode. So now anyone who has access to this workspace can now see this Power BI report. And we can now take the visuals that are in it and we can create dashboards, which is what I showed you earlier. So in this example, I'm just creating a new dashboard and I'm selecting the visuals that I want to put on that dashboard. And I'm just about to resize it and reconfigure it. And so effectively what we can do is we can create a subset of our data or visualizations in dashboards in a way that we think is best. And then we can drive from those dashboards straight into the reports to get more detailed data. So that's what this video is showing. And if I go back into the data, I can't remember what I was doing next. Okay, so next I was showing the share option. So now the data is published in the BI server, I can share this report with people in my organization or people outside. I can export the data as Excel, PowerPoint, or PDF, and now I can embed the report somewhere else. So in this part of the video, we're going to look at managing permissions. If we want to share with people outside the organization, then we just click add user, put their email address in, person@email.com, click grant access, and they would get an email to say they've had this report shared with them, and they'd be able to see that data as well. So that's how we create a dashboard, how we publish Power BI reports, and how we provide access to it. What we're now going to step into is looking at how we refresh it. Now, there's a load of stuff in here, but what we've just created is a report, and what sits underneath that is the data set. And the data set was the thing that we were configuring when we were playing around with the query and creating columns. And what we can do when it's published on the BI server is we can schedule the refresh so that the data is refreshed automatically. And we can do that by clicking these buttons. So we can share these videos after the seminar so you don't lose it. And we'll probably share the whole recording. We can define the frequency at which the Power BI server pulls the data through, up to 8 times per day automatically, and I guess up to 8 times per week if we don't want to have daily, although that would be weird. So what that means then is that we've always got semi-live data, and now what we're going to look at is how we get this back into Kanbanize. And if we click on File and Share, then we can get a PowerPoint link, a Power BI link. And if we go to our Kanbanize dashboard, gosh, I did this quickly. We can add a Power BI widget to our dashboard. And if we paste in the link, then we can get that report visualized inside the dashboard in Kanbanize. And what I didn't show in that video was that the interactivity stays. So when we click on the bars, then it filters all of the other stuff in the Power BI reports. And I believe that is the end of the demonstration and the end of all the videos. And so we're going to hand it over to everyone for questions. So either on the chat or on the hands up, we're open for questions or Q&A. Venetia had a challenge about automated refresh, scheduled refresh. So they're doing that manually every day. It's probably an important point to say that you can always manually refresh the data so that it's up to date. If 8 times per day isn't good enough for you for some reason, you can refresh and pull through the data. I'm not so sure, Venetia, why there'd be errors in the scheduled refresh, but often the errors come through in the change log, so you should be able to troubleshoot that. Are there any questions or comments or observations that people want to raise, either through the chat or through hands up? Difficult topic to cover online, potentially, but we've had a go. We've navigated the Wi-Fi issues, and now it's open for anyone who wants to explore anything. Yeah, so Robert's question, I'll come to you in a second, Venetia. So if you want to join the Kanbanize data with data from another source, I presume you have to do that in Power BI. Is that true? Yes, fundamentally, although maybe Carolina will talk shortly about the version 9 and the changes in the API in Kanbanize. But generally, if you're fusing multiple data sources together, then Power BI or other BI tools are the way to do it. And they all have connectors in them that cover the vast majority of user interfaces, so you don't have to code through APIs. So the best way to do it is to fuse it through Power BI, and then you can relate the data sets to each other. Carolina, did you want to say anything on version 9 of Kanbanize?
Well, basically, yeah, there is going to be a complete revamp of the API keys. So everything that you can do in the UI, you'll be also able to do with the API keys. So that basically is going to bring a lot of freedom in the actions that you can actually perform through the APIs, and of course a lot more integrations that you can do.
Thank you, Carolina. Venetia, you had your hand up and then put it down, so I'll wait and see if you put your hand up again. I think you did anyway. Maria, your question or comment, I guess. Sorry, Venetia.
Yeah, I did. I thought you were going to show how to embed the report in Kanban, but that might have been one of the fast part in your video.
It was the fast part. I can't believe how fast it was. So I'll invite Tom to share it again. To show how that's done. It was very fast. It was, I think it's all in video 7, Tom. can't believe how fast I was this afternoon. So hopefully you'll see me clicking on File and then Embed Report, Website or Portal. And then there's a little bit of a URL there, and you copy that URL and you paste it into the Power BI widget in the Kanbanize dashboard. So you can.
What I'll add on to this, Keith, is, and I'll put the link in the chat, is the step-by-step guide in the Kanbanize Help Center, which I found very useful when I was using this for Power BI for the first time, in terms of how to get data in, but also how to get data from Power BI onto your Kanbanize dashboard. So I'll put that in now.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom.
There we go.
There we go. Maria, your question, I guess the refresh will also happen in Kanbanize. Yeah, so any refresh of the data onto Power BI will be reflected back in the Kanbanize dashboard through that link. So, yeah. I can't see any more hands up. Thank you, Maria. And I can't see any more comments. We're happy to stick around for a few minutes for anyone who might want to. We are recording the webinar, so we will share the recording once we've cut out the bits where I stumble. We're open for any more questions, but I guess Tom's point is a key one. There's some great guidance on the Kanbanize website, so that's a perfect place to start. Yeah, all right, and now we're getting into the stuff. So is the existence of the Power BI widget the principal advantage that Power BI has over other tools? It means you don't have to leave Kanbanize, and I think that's a nice feature. Yeah, I think there are other connections that you could make with Kanbanize and others, but I think the widget is really good.
Yeah, I mean, with most BI tools, you can integrate Kanbanize, Tableau, Google Data, Visual Studio, ClickView is another one. It's a German one. So yeah, if like you or your client is using some specific BI solution, just let us know, because most of them get the same source input and with just a few tweaks, and our solution architecture team can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim put a point, and I think it's quite an important point. He said, I might have transformed the probability to a percentage type data field rather than the decimal. Absolutely right. I definitely should have done that if I was going to reuse this data, because any visuals that were just drawing on the probability probably would have been wrong based on what I did. So I just did it to demonstrate the calculate column functionality, which is quite useful. If I changed it to a percentage, then I would have had to have divided by 100, because it would have misinterpreted it. So, but yeah, key point. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for their attention tonight. I know it's probably, for most people, it's late in the evening, unless you're east of London at least. No, it's not east, it's west, unless you're west of London. We're happy to stick around for any closing comments, but thank you very much for your attention. Really glad to have had you on board tonight.
Thank you as well, Keith, on behalf of Kanbanize and everyone else on the call today. It's been a pleasure, and this is one of the mostly asked questions, how to utilize the integration with Power BI. So thank you so much for showing us some examples.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Keith.
My pleasure. Thanks, Antonio.
Yeah, Jim, for any future events, you can just look at you can subscribe to our LinkedIn page. That's where we announce them usually, or join our Kanbanize discussion topics group on LinkedIn.
Positive.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. So yeah, we're available, or Tom's available if there are any questions.
I just have comments. Yeah, so one of the things which is pretty cool is that you can actually get the data from many different other tools. So you could like use Kanbanize and some ERP system at the same time, and you can fuse the data. And by relating basically the data to each other, you can really create really monstrous reports. I've seen some clients do that. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's so powerful. I think it's so powerful that you could do anything, and therefore you've really got to think about what it is you want to do. Which is,
yeah, that's the challenge. Yeah, people ask us tell us about what kind of reports we can build, and I'm like, anything. Honestly,
yeah.
Imagination is the limit.
Which is bad news for me.
I was going to say, we definitely get imaginative with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any more questions or comments before we close? Wonderful. Well, have a great evening, everyone, when it comes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Guys.
Good evening.
Bye.
Thank you very much.